Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl and welcome to the Sewing Room channel. I get questions from viewers all the time on quilting. What pattern should they start with? They also ask a lot of questions about the one behind me, which I'll go into in more detail later. So I'm going to go over just a few of some of the quilts that I have that I recommend you should start with if you are a beginner. Or if you've got a little more experience, I'll show you some that you can also do that will be challenging for you. This here is your basic checkerboard quilt. It's cutting out squares the same size. In a particular sequence, you're sewing all of the stitches together. It does have quilt binding on it, but I can show you other ways of finishing off an edge, especially in the Quilt As You Go series, which I'll show you that in a moment. So this is a really good one to start with. This is my big block quilt. And again, they're just big squares stitched together in a specific sequence. But in this one, you'll notice it has kind of a diagonal pattern to it. So you cut out a certain number of blocks using a certain number of colors, and it's the order that you place it in that gives it this diagonal pattern. Here is another one. Now, before I go too much farther into this, I don't want you to get hung up on titles. In other words, there are quilters that have very specific titles to a pattern. I don't get stuck on titles at all. This is kind of in that brick layer category. So you have these rectangular shapes, again, that are stitched together in a certain pattern, and it gives kind of that zigzag look. In this quilt, I want you to focus on this section here. This is often called stack of coins. Just call it my coin quilt. And what you do is you can use jelly rolls and stitch those little strips together. You can cut them any width you want and just stack them up and put rows of sashing in between. If you have been quilting a while and you want to get started on working with half square triangles like you see around all the blocks, this is a nice one to start with. And you can make as many of these little, they're called friendship stars. You can make as many of them as you want and always make a great big quilt. But if you are a beginner, I recommend you start with a really small quilt, maybe baby size or lap quilt. If you try to do something too big, you're going to probably get overwhelmed and discouraged. Now, if you're a beginner, you're probably getting a little frightened when you look at this one, but you'll be surprised how easy it is to get this one started. You have 9 large squares stitched together. You make 2 cuts through that 9 square block, and then you stitch them together in any order you want. So it's not that difficult to do, but this is a really basic one to get started with. This is probably one of my most popular quilts, and it's called Quilt As You Go. And it's a great way to get started into quilting. You don't have to worry about binding on this one. It's sort of self-binding in a way. So look for the Quilt As You Go if you're interested in doing something like this. You don't have to worry about sashing strips to go in between your blocks. Now this one also might look a little scary to people. It's called a crazy quilt, so it has kind of a scary title. But the way I go about doing this one, it's pretty simple for, let's say, people who have some sewing experience. So it's more of a kind of a intermediate beginners or more advanced beginners quilt to start with. This is a small wall hanging that I made a few years ago, and it's called Attic Window. And you look like that you're standing in front of a window looking outside, or you can even make one that looks like you're looking inside of a house. I use a really basic way of creating this. So if you've been wanting to learn attic window, I have a really simple way to put this little mitered corner together. Now, I don't recommend this one for beginners, but if you've been making quilts for a while, this is called Disappearing Hourglass. And so you cut it up into smaller pieces and stitch it back together. If you're interested in learning more traditional quilt blocks, this is a quilt series, and I call it my novice beginner. In other words, you've been sewing just a little bit, but you want to get into quilting. This is the one to start with. So in each video, you'll learn one block. You'll use scrap fabrics, don't spend a lot of money. And of this one, you'll see I've got 12 blocks laid out. So for each single block pattern that I show you, you make 2, and then I show you how to stitch it into a quilt, put the border on it. You go through it from beginning to end. This is a very popular quilt series that I have, and I did this many years ago, and it's still incredibly popular. In this one, you learn traditional quilt blocks. It's just a little more advanced than the previous quilt series that I just showed you, but there are 12 different blocks. In each video, you learn a different block. I also take you through the step of putting the sashing on and putting a border around it. This is my beginner's botanical quilt series, and it's my latest one. And there are many different patterns in here. As you can see, there's a pineapple, there's a maple leaf, there's all different types of flower and fruit, strawberries, everything in orange. So you can choose to make every one of the blocks, duplicate some of them. You just choose a few and just duplicate them all over again. And again, I recommend you use up your scraps, because many of you keep saying, bring out some scrap buster videos. Well, these quilts are one of them. I also show you how to put a border on it, how to layer it, how to go in to do your quilting stitches, and how to put binding on the edges. So I don't leave any step out. You learn everything from beginning to end. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and looking at all of the quilts. Now I have many quilting videos, so these are just a few of them. So you want to check below your YouTube screen for those video links. There will be one link for just a general playlist of my quilts, and there'll be links listed down there for the 3 different quilt series that I have. I'm also starting a new quilt series, and that's flower applique blocks, in which I'll show you 12 different flower patterns that you can learn. Now, while you're checking out all of that stuff, make sure you follow me on Instagram and check out my Facebook page. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing. If you like the Sewing Room channel, one of the best ways to show your support is to subscribe by clicking on that red subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to click on share to share this video with your friends. And make sure you click on the bell so you receive notifications for all my new videos. I'm Cheryl. This is Manny. See you next time.